What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle. I'm here with Alex Miller, Robert Cessna, also of the Eagle, the usual Aggie sports crew. And our guest today is Andy Kostka of the Clarion Ledger, who covers Mississippi State. The Bulldogs are the Aggies' opponent this week at home, coming off that loss to Arkansas last week. Andy, how's it going?
It's pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. So let's get right into it. What are some of the biggest headlines and things you're looking forward to and looking for from the Bulldogs heading into this matchup at Kyle Field this weekend?
Yeah, you kind of feel like the offense needs to find some sort of consistency. They've shown it, especially when trailing in games late, that they can rattle off touchdowns, they can rattle off yards. They really haven't shown it at a good clip early on in games. There's been a lot of 3-and-outs, issues in the red zone. I remember 4 times they got into LSU territory on Saturday. They ended up with 3 points from those 4 possessions in the third quarter earlier. So that's an issue, and that's going to be that can't happen against a team like Texas A&M. And obviously it didn't work against LSU, and it didn't work against Memphis either the week before. So that's one of the big ones. You also look at the defense. The defense for Mississippi State has been real good, but big plays have been an issue. So we'll kind of see if those big plays kind of crop up again this Saturday.
I know against LSU dropped a whole lot of defensive backs and kind of a dime package, forced the intermediate and a check down passes the whole game. Is that not something that the Bulldogs and Mike Leach like to try to have to check it down all the way down the field? Because it seemed like that was really effective from LSU last week.
Well, we've seen that almost every week through the first 4, where teams pretty much drop 8 most of the time. They're pretty content. And Coach O said, they wanted, Will Rogers and Mississippi State to take the underneath passes, that they were fine giving up 5 yards here or there. Is when they got into the red zone, they switched. Well, LSU helped when they switched to a 4-man front on the defensive line in the red zone. That kind of helped compress the it compressed the middle a little bit, so they couldn't hand the ball off. And then, there was just less room for the underneath stuff in the red zone, so it kind of stalled. I think that's going to be the formula to beating Mississippi State, is kind of letting them have these checkdowns and just knowing that, okay, we're going to, they're going to be kind of long drives, whatever, but we're just going to have to, beat them in this, this long game. We're going to give up field goals. We're not going to give up touchdowns, that kind of thing. And it worked. It worked against LSU. It worked against Memphis. We'll see if Texas A&M can kind of use the exact same formula against Mississippi State this week.
Andy, what about, Leach talks a lot about being the youngest team in the SEC, which, factually is correct. How long is that going to work? And have you seen them make some kind of progress in the last 4 games? And, when is that no longer going to be, I don't want to use an excuse, but no longer keep them from winning? Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, interesting question. I wish I knew the exact, okay, by week 6 that's no longer something that they're gonna be able to do. But you kind of feel like even at this point, you look at the players that are contributors. He's right that they're a young team, but Will Rogers he's now had he had 6 last year. He's had 10 starts under his belt at quarterback, so he's getting he's a lot more experienced. Got guys like Jaden Wally, his sophomore wide out. He's very experienced. So you have kind of key contributors that are young, yeah, and it's legit. They are a very young team, but you're going to start to need to see some improvement pretty quickly. I know he's kind of used, again, I guess I'll use for lack of a better term, excuse. He's used that reasoning as maybe why Mississippi State has looked a little, up and down, inconsistent a lot of times, where they kind of overthink things. He says a lot of the time when they're trailing in games. Maybe some of the pressure comes off a little bit and they're like, okay, we just got to make a play. And they stop overthinking it and they make a play. Your guess is as good as mine as to when the youth kind of gives way to, people can kind of believe in themselves a little bit more. I think that was the term most players use after Saturday's game, was they just have to have belief because they know they can do it. The results are there in kind of, I don't want to say garbage time, but when they're coming back late in games, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, they're moving the ball really well. They just need to kind of believe in that the entire time. And until that happens, it's going to be tough. You can't come back every single week.
Now, what went right? Because when you look, this team beat North Carolina State, which beat Clemson last week to put them in the top 25. So when you look at Mississippi State, they could have easily beat Memphis and LSU. So you look at what went right in that NC State game moving forward for them.
Yeah, I think the run defense against NC State was phenomenal. They gave up, very few yards to a team that had put up 200 plus the week before, and that's going to be really interesting against Texas A&M. Honestly, with Spiller, kind of, he's going to be a back they have not faced the quality of yet. So we'll see, this Saturday if they can kind of, follow that same blueprint of stop the run and then don't give up the big plays against NC State. That was another thing. That Achilles heel popped up again against LSU. I think it was 47% of LSU's total yards came on 3 plays. So it's like, it was a 68-yard touchdown, 51-yard touchdown, and 41-yard touchdown, I'm pretty sure. So those were absolute big chunks that besides that, I mean, they held LSU kind of in check. And those three touchdowns, that's 21 of the 28 points they gave up. So if you just, you got to feel like if Mississippi State can kind of look a little bit more like the NC State game, where they limited the big plays and they did great against the run, because they did well against the run against LSU too, although that's not their bread and butter, I suppose. It's not going to be like Texas A&M, but that's going to be a big thing. I think the offensive side of things, you mentioned, like, has there been improvement that you've seen, even with 2 straight losses? The previous question, the offensive line has looked a little bit better in pass blocking. It looked terrible against Memphis. They gave up 15 pressures, 21% of Will Rogers' dropbacks, he was pressured. And then only 9% of his dropbacks against LSU, which they lead the country in sacks, and only 9% of them were pressures. So you feel like, okay, maybe the offensive line is kind of figuring out this pass blocking thing a little bit. Of course, you always feel like, yeah, LSU was dropping 8. So that, how much pass rushing they're really doing. But again, Memphis was doing the same thing, and they still had, 2 sacks and 15 pressures on Rogers. So you feel like maybe the offensive line is gelling a little bit here. The defense, if they can kind of hold down that run, which will be the biggest test yet, this week will be for them. That'll be interesting to see.
On the converse, A&M has had their own offensive line struggles in the past 2 games. How would you rate Mississippi State's pass rush and then also their ability just to get penetration on run plays and work over some of the offensive lines that they faced?
Yeah, one of the biggest talking points has been they need a better pass rush. Actually, they haven't really gotten to the quarterback consistently enough. I guess against LSU, they had a couple sacks, so it was a little bit better. We'll see kind of if they can keep that up, but it has been pretty dry overall, just getting to the quarterback. There have been some close calls, there's been some hurries, some hits, but haven't really gotten as many sacks as I think they consistently want. And that's been a really big talking point from them. As for the run stopping ability, I mean, they've been very good, especially on outside runs. I mean, the NC State is a real outside run team. And Mississippi State's defensive backs did a really good job, especially the safeties, where they got downhill quickly and pulled guys down after pretty short gains. Of course, that also, it hurt a little bit because the 68-yard touchdown they gave up to, Kayshon Boutte against LSU, the 2 safeties bit on a play action fake, and then the slant, went straight up the middle. So if they're going to overcompensate on trying to stop the run, there could be issues there. We saw it against LSU, but overall, they've been a real good run stopping team. Pass rush might need a little bit more consistency as well.
A&M, this is part of the year where you start looking at injuries. A&M the last couple of weeks have had injury problems, and I think it's been reflected in their play. What about Mississippi State being another physical game coming up here? Probably when you look at both lines for Mississippi State and A&M, what's the health for Mississippi State coming in this game?
Yeah, Mike Leach, as he reminded me, very snarkily on Monday, he does not comment on injuries, as I won't know. The health, we don't know. But Emmanuel Forbes, the one of the 2 cornerbacks, he and Martin Emerson are a really, really strong duo. They create the most experienced duo kind of for a corner in the SEC. We don't know if Emmanuel Forbes will be available on Saturday. Leach said we're always all available, which know it's not true because we can see guys are not playing. But so we'll have to see. Saturday, if he's dressed, it would be a big boost for this team. He was carted off the field late against LSU, but we really don't know much besides that. If he's available, obviously great. He's been, he has 2 picks in 2 straight games, a lot of passes defended. He was burned on Kayshon Boutte, but he didn't have any safety help over top, which factored, that was a big issue on that play, was kind of the safety help was not there at all. So we'll see if he's healthy. Nathaniel Watson, he was never officially, there was obviously no comment on if he had an injury or not, but he didn't play against Memphis, which is indication that he probably had something. He played 30 some snaps against LSU, kind of mixing time with he and Jet Johnson. So that was important that he was back. It helps out the linebacker core a lot. So you feel pretty good about maybe where the defense is if Forbes is healthy. If he's not, then it's kind of comes down to Richardson, who's his backup. He's a sophomore. He's only played 29 snaps this season. That's gonna be a big test for him coming in to replace Forbes if he has to. We don't know, but if he has to.
What about, I'm interested, year 2 in Mike Leach, such a great hire for Mississippi State. Over here, we're trying to keep people from jumping off the ledge. A&M loses a game, and they're talking national championship. That's, by the way, Mississippi State 2-2. What's the pulse with Leach right now?
I think if we judged everything off of Twitter, we would have a lot of issues in our society. But yeah, I think it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Like I think there's a vocal minority of the fan base that is kind of against what Leach is doing, at least from what I've seen from my mentions. Which, I mean, what does that mean? We'll take it with a grain of salt there. But at the other side of the things, it's like, yeah, they are a young, very young team. That is a legit thing that he says. They are very young. They are showing some signs of progress. You see it in flashes here and there that they look good. It's just, I think the biggest issue that fans kind of have is the lack of consistency and how the offense seems like it doesn't always have answers. And obviously his error rate is kind of, his claim to fame, for good reason. But the offense hasn't maybe taken the strides that some people envisioned in year 2 yet. Although we've seen signs of it, flashes here and there where it's like, okay, Will Rogers is still throwing for 400 yards, and it's a lot that's getting done. It's maybe just not getting in the end zone, when they kind of stall out at the 20. So there's certain things they're frustrating, I think, for some fans. But I don't think if the question is he on the hot seat, he's not on the hot seat. I think he's okay. Yeah.
Do Mississippi State fans kind of sense there might be some blood in the water after what happened with A&M in Arkansas last week? What's kind of the Twitter pulse of the feel for this game heading into it from the fan base? Yeah,
I think you almost feel like the opposite, right? Where it's like Texas A&M is going to be like, oh, we just lost the game. Like we need to make a statement win here. It's almost kind of the opposite side of that. We'll see. I mean, I think some people think that Texas A&M is definitely more beatable than maybe when they initially saw the schedule released, however long ago that was. That was that 3-game stretch when you first saw it on, with LSU, then Texas A&M, then Alabama for Mississippi State. That's a grueling stretch. Suddenly you look at Texas A&M and you're feeling like, okay, maybe they have a chink in the armor. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, A&M's coming off this, a loss to a good Arkansas team. But they might want to make a statement here and say like, okay, that was a 1-week thing. We're back to doing what we can do.
And how does Mississippi State come in and win this game? I mean, Mike Leach has brought Tech in, and he even mentioned in his presser yesterday, he loves coming to Kyle Field because he's had success. So I know he's got confident coming in. What would have to happen for Mississippi State to come in and win this game?
Yeah. I think for Mississippi State to come in, you got to keep Spiller in check. You can't lose on the ground on defense. Offensively, you can't have turnovers. I mean, they had 2 really critical turnovers in the first half against LSU. Those are both deep inside of LSU territory. You're looking at those. I mean, even if you get field goals on this drive, you've only lost by 3 points. I mean, that could be the difference right there. So yeah, I think it's really the turnovers that have popped up. They had 4 against Louisiana Tech that built such a big hole that they climbed back from. And in the first week, they had, I think they had 1 real costly one against Memphis, a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. So we've seen the offensive turnovers kind of, pick up here and there. If they can stop that and then probably hold down the run a little bit, you feel pretty good about where you are if you're Mississippi State.
To ask you guys still celebrating winning? They still celebrating winning the baseball title, or how's that work now that football season's here? Just I'm a baseball guy. I like baseball.
Yeah. I was out at they had a fall scrimmage, just the intra squad on Friday, and it wasn't the biggest crowd, but on Twitter people were still they're celebrating maybe it helped actually with the recent losses that they were like, oh, baseball's almost here, So, yeah.
Andy, you cover one of the most interesting people, Mike Leach. We know it's your first year on the beat, but have you had any Mike Leach moments yet?
Probably not. Not anything. Well, last week press conference, it wasn't me who asked, but another person. He was looking at the media food that was provided at the press conference, and it was some sort of sandwiches, and he started going. It was like 2 straight minutes of debating the dip, like what's better, ham or turkey, and like he went in depth, like he had thoughts on this, like it was very like thought provoking. I was like, wow, I had not thought this much about ham or turkey. Like this is pretty interesting stuff here. I think what he came away with, ham sometimes can get a little slimier earlier than turkey, so turkey's safer. So like I think that was the takeaway, but that's the boiled down version. I wish I had it on tape. It was very fascinating. So that's pretty good. He also had one. I asked him a question early, where he went on like this monologue about players pouting on the sideline and how he like hates pouting players. It was an interesting monologue. I think I wrote a story on it purely because I felt like using the interesting quote. So yeah, he always is due for kind of a funny quirk here or there. Obviously he knows a lot about a lot of different things. He was talking last week about his law school essays and stuff like that. Like he's a fascinating guy. He knows more than football, that's for sure.
That's fantastic. Guys, anything else?
I think that will do it. Anytime Mike Leach comes to town, I think it's pretty exciting personally.
For sure. Andy, where is some of the places that our readers can find some of your work gearing up for the game?
Yeah. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my username is AF Kostka, which is AFKOSTKA. Otherwise, go to Clarion Ledger, their website, sports, Mississippi State. It's all my stuff's on there.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you this week for the big game against Texas A&M and Mississippi State.
Thanks for having me.